No one's truly listening to each other. We're just hearing each other and it's going in one ear and out the other. And honestly, that's no way to have a productive conversation, because why did we have the conversation in the first place if we weren't coming to an understanding? The key to really coming into an understanding is to be an active listener, is to think about what the person is saying, take into account what they may be feeling and why. And honestly, y'all know my favorite word is empathy. Empathy is what it takes to come to an understanding and truly hear someone's perspective, even though you don't agree, even though you feel like they were dead wrong. Hey, it's EK, Erica Knox, and welcome back to yet another episode of Two Things Can Be True here at Woman of Tomorrow. Y'all, I'm so excited to dive into this topic because we're getting spicy. We're talking about disagreements and understanding, and sometimes you have to agree to just disagree, but understanding doesn't eliminate differences. So let's get into the conversation. We're wasting no time because this topic is hot on the press, okay? Let's get into it. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about agreeing to disagree is that honestly, I'm bound to bump heads with people every week, every day, just because I'm willing to stand 10 toes down in what I believe, my morals and my values. And sometimes that conflicts with people's morals and values, and I'm not willing to shift mine for theirs. And so we have to agree to disagree. But that doesn't mean I have to be disrespectful. That doesn't mean that we have to have conflict. That just means that we are coming to an understanding that we're not seeing the same thing, and it's okay. The world that we live in and the life that we live is from our lens. And so if someone doesn't have the lens that you have on your life, that's okay. And I take peace with knowing that I can walk away knowing that I stood on my values and my morals. And honestly, I can take peace with knowing that I stood 10 toes down on my morals, my values, my ideas, my perspective, trusting myself in that process. And so let's get into all things agreeing to disagree and how we can actually show up and thrive in that space, because all conflict doesn't mean that we have to shut the door. Sometimes the door remains open while I agree to disagree. So the most important thing when we're coming to an understanding is listening. Sometimes we speak more than we listen. We are listening only to respond so we can get our point across. Sometimes I just want to get my point across. Sometimes I just feel so strongly about what I have to say that though you're speaking to me about your perspective that you feel passionate about, I'm just not in a space to receive it. And so therefore, what we're doing is just sharing our perspectives, but no one's truly listening to each other. We're just hearing each other and it's going in one ear and out the other. And honestly, that's no way to have a productive conversation, because why did we have the conversation in the first place if we weren't coming to an understanding? And so the key to really coming into an understanding is to be an active listener, is to think about what the person is saying, take into account what they may be feeling and why. And honestly, y'all know my favorite word is empathy. Empathy is what it takes to come to an understanding and truly hear someone's perspective, even though you don't agree, even though you feel like they were dead wrong. Sometimes I have to take a back seat and let my empathy lead the way so that I can have productive, peaceful conversations. Otherwise, we just bump heads and come to no resolve. And that's no way I want to live my life at work, in my romantic relationships, in my friendships. Oftentimes, I'm not willing to leave that thing. And so we might as well work it out together, because I agree to disagree so that we can all have some type of peace as we go into the rest of the journey. Now, I'm about to release the EP and I'm super excited to share it with you, and it's called Ego and Pride, okay? When I think about coming to an understanding, do you know what gets in the way? Ego and pride. EP are two things that literally show up at your doorstep, and when you accept them in, honey, there is no coming to a resolve. Honestly, you feel like you're above everyone's opinion. You have all the answers. There's nothing more that anyone can share with you that can alter your perspective. And that's just not an abundant mindset. An abundant mindset says that honestly, even though I don't know what you have to offer, I can learn from everyone. Whether it's a harsh lesson or something that I needed to know and they offered it to me in peace, either way, I'm leaving here with something, okay? As Denzel Washington said. And so understanding that sometimes your ego and your pride has to take a back seat so that we don't escalate these disagreements to fights and altercations and strife, burning bridges. I don't know about you, but I'm not at a stage to be burning bridges just because. Now, if we decide to mutually part ways because we no longer align with each other's journey, I'm down for that. But just simply burning bridges because we can't come to a resolve because our ego and pride is taking the front seat is no excuse as beautiful, thriving, abundant adults. We can't be doing that. We have to leave room for humility in conversation so that you can see from someone else's perspective, so that you can have a healthy conversation. How many of us are raised in homes where whatever the parent says is true? The parent can say, because I said so, because I said so, because I said so, but that literally silences any child's thoughts or questions or inquiries. Think about that in this context. Imagine if someone came up to you today and you were pouring out your heart, you were passionate, you're telling them why this idea is really gonna work. You're telling them why you feel hurt by their behavior. You're telling them why you feel unseen and unheard and honestly betrayed. And they're like, LOL, I said what I said because I said so. That response literally shuts the door for any emotions and any empathy and causes strife. In that situation, someone always leaves a bit broken. I don't know about you, but life is already gonna try to break me up, so I don't wanna leave conversations with people that I love, care for, or respect with strife and more brokenness. And so it's on us to take the onus to say, you know what, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'm gonna give you a moment to get that off and try to understand from your lens. And sometimes we part ways and sometimes we grow closer, but it's up to you to decide whether or not you even entertain the conversation in a healthy manner so that we can actually move forward with this thing. And like I said, there is such thing as, I get where you're coming from, I'm just not coming from there. And honestly, that's how you maintain your personal integrity. But what I like to do to show people that I see them and at least understand them is reflect back what they said. So when someone says something to you, it's really beautiful to reflect back what they said. Sometimes it brings clarity and sometimes it shows where someone's being a hypocrite. So either way, we're coming to more clarity in the conversation so that we can continue it healthily. And so you can easily say, so what I'm hearing that you're saying is ... I'm hearing that you're saying you feel betrayed because I didn't show up for your birthday that year. I'm hearing that you're saying that you feel unseen because I didn't show up for you on social media in the way that you wanted me to. I'm hearing that you feel undervalued because the idea that you brought up wasn't even acknowledged in the meeting. So thinking about all of these ways that you can allow people to know that they are seen even if you disagree. Saying things like that, and I understand that you feel ... can help you to really clarify your understanding while still maintaining that you disagree with what they did or said. And we all know that friendship is a journey in itself. How many of us have had friendships that we've had to part ways with because our pride and ego took a front seat and we weren't able to tell them how we felt unseen or unheard, and we weren't able to come to a resolve? Honestly, when I think about friendships, I think about this one instance where I honestly felt betrayed by my friend. I felt like she didn't show up for me in the way that I needed to be shown up for, and she felt like she showed up for me in the way that she knew how. And so we had to have a conversation honestly about, what did you need in that moment, Erica? What was it that you needed, and did you communicate that need? And then on the latter end with my friend, we had to have a conversation about whether or not she's showing up for me in the way that I feel seen and heard and appreciated. Love languages are a thing across the board, and if you buy someone flowers as an apology and they really just wanted you to actually apologize, the flowers was a great notion, it came with great intention, but the action didn't actually portray the apology because the person on the receiving end's love language was verbal and not gifts. And so really taking into account, friend, how do you want to be loved? How can I show you that I appreciate you, I see you, I understand you? What are the ways that you require support? What are the ways that you require communication? Is it social media? Is it Instagram? Do you want me to pull up on you in person? That is how you come to an understanding, because that disagreement of betrayal and how I felt was very valid. And how she felt that she showed up for me was also valid. And two things can be true. We can come to an understanding that I don't feel you showed up for me in the best way, and disagree that she did. She showed up for me during her best time, and I didn't feel received because of how I received love. And when we were able to discuss that, we were able to forgive each other for the blind spot, which was communication. We just didn't communicate how we wanted to be appreciated and seen in that moment. And so therefore the person wasn't able to provide that. And it's as simple as that. And so we let ego and pride take a back seat, and we decided to apologize. We humbled ourselves. We said, I agree. I see where you're coming from. I'm not coming from there, but I at least understand where you're coming from. The I see where you're coming from is not shady. It's really saying, I get it. If I was in your situation, I may have done that with all of the experience that you have and the background knowledge that you brought to the situation. Sharing that is what makes us human. Now, we know we live in an age of social media, and honestly, the think pieces on social media are crazy, but valid. And I see oftentimes that we often come to disagreements just because someone has a differing perspective. When you have a differing perspective on social media and then sometimes in person, people often feel like the first resort is to just clash and disagree, and now we're enemies. Now we're total opposites. We can never see eye to eye. I'm going for this thing and I'm burning the bridge because I just could never see where you're coming from. But do you see how that's so much pride? Sometimes we have to just take a back seat and say, you know what? I wonder why you thought the way you thought. I wonder what life experience led you to take that as your first resort of reaction. I wonder what kind of household you grew up in that allowed you to make that first assumption. And that brings empathy into the conversation again. So replacing your ego with empathy really solves a world of problems, because honestly, we don't have to be enemies. We can be empathetic and understanding and still disagree. So that brings me to my next point about recognizing your defensive position. Sometimes we allow offense to take a front seat. Offense breeds so much resentment, bitterness, and hatred. When you are constantly offended by every single thing, you're actually looking for opportunities to be even more offended by people, because that's the stance that you want to take. That is no way to live an abundant life, because you are so offended and so bitter and so angry that anything that anyone does can negatively impact you, sway your mind, and sway your emotion. That is not a power stance. And so in this season, practice self-awareness. Practice understanding where you are and why that person's reaction has triggered something in you, and think about ways that you can allow yourself to have peace and understanding so that everyone's actions don't impact you so quickly. Offense is truly a burden to your growth and self-awareness. And that's something I'm leaving in the past, okay? So if it takes for me to take the high road and recognize where I'm positioned and why I'm reacting to things the way I'm reacting to them, I'm willing to do that work, because I don't want to be so offended that I don't see a beautiful opportunity to understand someone, allow them to be seen, and also to grow my mindset. And in the spirit of two things can be true, you can both honor your morals and values by disagreeing with someone's actions or words, while also still honoring the fact that they deserve to have their own opinion and their viewpoint based on their experiences and their wisdom. So let me just give you a practical thing that I use, especially in the workplace when we're having collaborative brainstorms and we're thinking of new ideas to implement and want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. I use the yes and method, saying, yes, I honor your perspective, and then I bring in my perspective. It shows that I may not necessarily agree 1,000% with your perspective, and that's just on respect, okay? Especially in the workplace, especially in romantic relationships and even friendships. Everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and understood, and all it takes is for you to allow your ego and pride to take a back seat in order to allow the empathy and new energy to come in the front seat. So once again, we've had an amazing conversation, and I hope that you go into your conversations with more empathy and not ego during this season of Two Things Can Be True. I'm so happy that we came to the conclusion that you can honor someone's different viewpoint while still staying true to your morals, your values, and your perspective, okay? So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Two Things Can Be True, where we dived really deep into understanding but disagreement and agreeing to disagree. I'm so happy to keep the conversation going, so be sure to check out all the other episodes that we've come out with, because the conversations are brewing, honey. I can't wait to see you at the next one.